Members, please take your seats. All members, please take your seats. We are going to be honoring two of our retiring members. Representative Chris Ross has served the 158th District of Chester County for 20 years. He was elected in 1996. He is currently serving as the chair of the House Commerce Committee, has been a member of the Local Government Commission, has chaired the House Urban Affairs Committee, the House Liquor Control Committee, and has been very active as a member of the Council of State Governments. Prior to Chris's election, he served as chair of the London Grove Township Board of Supervisors. He resides in East Marlborough Township in Chester County with his wife, Cecilia. They have 2 children and 3 grandchildren. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome Representative Ross to the rostrum. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to put you at ease. I have no union leaders dressed up in furry suits waiting in the wings to come and greet you. However, I would like to remind my good friends on the other side of the aisle and also my good friend, former fellow chair, Representative Paul Costa, that there is a parallel with Groundhog Day about liquor privatization. It will be coming back. Anyway, I'd like to begin by introducing my guests who have joined me today. To my left from my district office is my current staff, Julia Loving and Joe Alexak, former office manager Nina Gregory, who took a leave of absence 2 years ago to ably manage my 6-week campaign, a whirlwind campaign. And also with me are my retired staff, Kathy Ziner with her husband George, Winnie Wary, who is joined by her husband Sam. I know that my success and popularity in the district is due in no small part to the efforts of my district office staff over the years. They're the face that interacts with the public on a day-to-day basis, and they have done a fantastic job for me. Sitting with them is my wife, Cecilia, who has asked me not to mention her, so I won't. I won't say how important she's been, cheering me up, calming me down, and when necessary, telling me to stop taking myself so seriously or to stop whining. I would have told you she makes me a better state representative and a better person. But she's asked me not to say anything about her, so I won't. Also present with me here today are some good friends who have helped me over the years from the very beginning, worked on my early campaigns, and were always there for me. Dr. John Fong, Dr. Colin Johnstone, Linda Cott, and Don and Pat Raymond. I've had a lot of people helping me here in Harrisburg, excuse me, but only one who handles all the administrative work in my Harrisburg office, including the work for the committees that I've chaired. That's Dixie Minnick. Dixie started with me in my first term, and she has always been the consummate professional, anticipating my needs, taking care of visitors from the district, and making everyone who comes into the office feel glad they stopped by. While Dixie handled the administrative side of the 4 committees that I've chaired, a much larger cast of outstanding staff handled the legislative work. They are, from when I chaired the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee Joyce Frim, and Garth Shipman, who later served with me on the Commerce Committee. From my time chairing the Urban Affairs Committee, Christine Goldbeck, Ashley Schaefer, and Amy Hockenberry. For my first time chairing the Commerce Committee, John Scarpato. From this session with the Liquor Control Committee, Shauna Bosesi and Mike Biaki. And finally, from my return to the Commerce Committee, Jen Weeder. They all produced great work, often under difficult circumstances and tight deadlines. They put up with my micromanagement with good humor. We didn't always get the result we wanted, but we always put the best possible work forward. And I'm grateful to them for their efforts over the years. Would you please stand for a little bit of applause? Also with us today are Joe DeKlinsky, former Director of Research and former Executive Director of the Environmental Resources and Energy Committee. Joe Miller, another former Director of Research and former Executive Director of the Commerce Committee. Sharon Schwartz, former Executive Director of the Aging and Older Adult Services Committee. And Chris Lamondo, former Deputy Director of Legislative Affairs under Governor Ridge and Schweiker. I asked them to join me today because they each played a critical role in helping me develop major legislative efforts, and they tirelessly worked to help me pass them. I have the utmost respect for them, and I'm very grateful for the help that they gave me. Would you please stand? As the speaker noted, for my entire 20-year career, I've had the great good fortune to serve on the Local Government Commission, which I believe is one of the most talented and professional resources we have available to us in the Capitol. Joining us are former Executive Director, Mike Gasberry, current Executive Director Phil Klotz, Commission staff Dave Green, Chris Gazy, Karen Baer, Wanda Snyder, and Sonia Ebersol. The Commission is bipartisan, bicameral, and works by consensus. From the local police task force, the update of Act 47, the Property Reform Task Force, and all the many commissions drafted bills over the years, I have felt fortunate to champion their outstanding work. Please stand. I figured that I've actually served with about 400 different members over the 20 years that I've been here, perhaps a bit more, perhaps a bit less. And there are really too many of them to mention, and so all I'm going to do is highlight a few that are typical of the good people that I've worked with over the years. The people we know the best are the people that sit around us. And I've been very fortunate with my seatmates or near neighbors over the years. In my first term, it was Sandy Major, Larry Sather, Pat Vance, and Jerry Stern, who helped explain the mysterious ways of the House to a wide-eyed freshman. Today, it's Warren Kampf, Adam Harris, Mike Tobash, Fred Keller, and Will Tallman, who put up with my grumpy sarcasm and bad jokes from a grizzled veteran. Thank you, guys. I'm grateful to my colleagues in the Chester County delegation for their help and support over the years, to all of those who served on the committees that I've chaired for their cooperation in helping me get our work done efficiently. I also want to thank a few of my friends on the other side of the aisle, including Bill Keller, Bob Freeman, Pam DeLisio, and of course my constant companion and alter ego, Chairman Thomas. I used to think he was following me around, but then I came back to the Commerce Committee, so maybe I'm following him around. I'm not sure. Before I close, I want to share two observations that have occurred to me about us here in the House over the past 20 years. The first has to do with professionalism. Back in the 1970s, Congress and the Nixon administration decided to move policy decisions that had been tending to concentrate in Washington back to the states. New resources in the form of block grants and revenue sharing were made available to spur this new federalism. It quickly became apparent, though, to leaders such as Matt Ryan and Leroy Irvis here in Pennsylvania, that state legislators here were ill-equipped for these new responsibilities. They were supported, as Mark Cohen had mentioned, by very limited staff and were paid so little as part-time workers that they were clearly going to be overwhelmed. The response was to increase staffing and pay so that members could handle the complexities of crafting legislation and managing complex issues and increase budgets more effectively and have the time to do it. But about 15 years ago, after the pay raise fiasco, a contrary trend developed which saw government as the problem, with those of us who had had experience in Harrisburg were seen as corrupt. Many believed that only untainted outsiders could fix what was wrong with property taxes, our schools, or the budget. Even veteran legislators started buying into this story by running campaigns portraying themselves as outsiders who attack the system. Unfortunately, the inexperienced newcomers usually found that the hard problems were actually harder to resolve when they came into contact with legislators from other parts of the state with different points of view than theirs. The reaction on part of some is to simply sweep those legislators out and find even newer, less experienced people to replace them. This spiral could then continue until it reached its logical conclusion with the election of 203 unsullied newborn babies. Before we get to that point, can I ask you all to please tell the press and the public the truth? The job is complicated and difficult. These policy questions are not easily resolved. And while the legislative process was designed to be full of checks and balances to protect the public, those very same checks and balances make it difficult to get things done. And knowledge and experience, even a bit of professionalism, help a legislator do the job well. You really owe it to your constituents and to yourselves to let them know that. My second observation is that the balance between political competition and legislating has changed. When I first came to Harrisburg, the first year after the election was devoted to working together to resolve difficult issues on a technical, bipartisan basis. By the beginning of the second year, cooperation began to slow down as we entered the campaign season, and we started to look for partisan advantage on issues. More recently, though, as soon as one campaign ends, the next one begins. Within a month of the election, campaign consultants are in contact with the newly elected members, planning fundraisers and strategies to put the other party in an awkward position for an election still 2 years away. Political competition is certainly not new, and it's necessary. And it's not even more vicious than it was in the past, because there were some nasty things that went on in history if you look. But this lack of space between campaigns is a change. And in my opinion, a change for the worse. In a sense, political competition and passing legislation require opposite skills. In a political campaign, you seek to point out how you differ from your opponent. Anything that casts your opponent in a good light is bad for you. Campaigns are a zero-sum game. For you to go up, your opponent must go down. To be successful in passing legislation, though, you have to minimize the space between you and other members and focus on what is good for both of you, a win-win solution. The best laws are ones that work throughout the state and not just in areas some of us represent. As the legislator's approval rating continues to tank, we hear frustration growing about our inability to resolve tough issues like school funding or property tax reform. We need to find a bit of space between political campaigns. Perhaps we could develop some technical issue-oriented meetings in January of the new term, with all the House and Senate members invited. These meetings could be facilitated by neutral experts from places like the Pennsylvania Economy League, National Conference of State Legislatures, Council of State Government, and our foundations and universities here in the state. Conversations should not be recorded, and the focus should not be on negotiating final decisions, but better understanding the problems and each other, so that we could be better prepared to take effective action later. I make these observations today because I like this place and the members who serve here. I will always have a warm spot in my heart for this room and those who serve in it. Thank you all for your kindness over the years. You have my very best wishes for the future.
Chris, thank you very much for your insight and for your years of outstanding service to the citizens in your district and throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I remember being in the back rows, a backbencher, and I would see this gentleman who sat more up front working on legislation that was before us, regardless of whether it was a Democratic governor or Republican governor, and even whether we were in the minority or majority, certainly more in the majority. And I thought, how is that really smart guy getting so much done, and how's he so effective? And I would watch and see Chris interact both on the floor and in caucus, and I got to know some of his staff members, and he was so diligent and knew issues, both the pros and cons, and would identify what the problems are that he wanted to address in that particular legislation, and still always had sort of the small p political component in about how you work it through both chambers and get it on a governor's desk. Chris, you are one of the folks, and you were always so humble about it, and probably in taking your remarks about that space, you were able to make use of that space, ever shrinking as you've put forth to us, and really capitalize on outstanding bipartisan legislation that made a positive difference in Pennsylvanians' lives. Thank you for all that you have done. It has been my honor to work with you on quite a few issues, and I just must tell you on a personal level, I learned very, very much from you. And to you and your family and friends and staff, congratulations as you move on to the next adventure in your life. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. I know.
I'll send you the paper.